Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm David Rooney, publisher of the Revelstoke Current, and welcome to In Conversation, our periodic discussion of politics with movers and shakers in our province, in our region. And today I'm speaking with MLA Norm Macdonald from Columbia River Revelstoke. Norm, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. And again, we're in a really wonderful setting. We're here at one of the most beautiful museums, I think, in British Columbia, the Railway Museum. And it's a perfect setting for any conversation.
Well, it certainly says Revelstoke to most people.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Now you're just back from Victoria.
Yeah.
You were down there for the budget.
Yes.
And tell me, what came leaping out of the budget of you?
Well,
in particular.
I mean, certainly what I was most displeased with was the priorities that the government had. This is a budget that the government emphasizes as one where there's really no money for anything, but they did find money to give a $236 million tax cut to the richest 2%, and actually most of that money, because it's an additional tax on any money that you earn over $150,000. Of course, the primary beneficiaries will be the people making far more than $150,000. If you made $1 million, for instance, it's a tax cut that would save you $17,000. So, if you think of a tax cut as spending, with all of the needs that are there, and in Revelstoke alone, I can think of all sorts of examples of where the money would be better spent. To choose to spend it on the richest 2 or 1% of the population, to spend it with a group that I didn't hear them asking for tax relief. It just seems ridiculous. We have seniors here in Revelstoke that are coming to us with very serious issues. We have no money apparently for a conservation officer. Over 4 years, that would be $1 billion that we could put onto improvements on the Trans-Canada Highway that were promised. So there's all sorts of things that need to be done, and for the only serious spending in the budget to go towards the wealthiest is, to me, it's ludicrous, and it speaks to a set of priorities that I don't share, and I don't think people here in Revelstoke share.
I'm surprised the Premier and members of the Cabinet came to a straight face when they were talking about that.
It is surprising. I mean, it's one of the faults of our system that if you took all 85 MLAs, including the Liberal MLAs, and actually gave them a free say in how we would spend money, I don't think there's any way that group of MLAs would come up with this as a priority. But just the way things work, this comes from the Premier. It makes sense to her in the political sense that these are the people that she goes to for donations. Those donations are substantial. I guess she feels that the political implications of making this sort of a decision is more than balanced off by the money that will come to run the next election. But in terms of good governance, it's a terrible decision. It's the wrong one for Revelstoke, but as I look across British Columbia, I think it's the wrong set of priorities for practically every community.
Well, I think that certainly seems to be the case with regards to some of the issues that are really important to people here. You mentioned the conservation officer. For those of you who have been living under a rock perhaps for the last year or so, Adam Christie, our longtime conservation officer here, retired and was not replaced, despite the fact that we have one of the most bear-centered cities in the province. And not that bears are necessarily always dangerous to us, but they are sometimes a nuisance and a hazard. And the nearest conservation officer is now in Golden or in Vernon, which is problematic because it can take, if somebody calls in a report to the rep line, it could take, depending on what else is happening, 2 to 4 hours for anyone to get down here and deal with something. By then the animal's probably gone.
In practical terms, there are safety issues. There's bears, you say. There's also cougar.
Yeah.
We've had incidents where there really needed to be a trained conservation officer. We went in Golden for a period of time without a It just complicates everything. It puts unnecessary pressure on the RCMP. This is not what they are trained to do. It's unfair to them. They have to step in and fix, fill the void that's left with no conservation officers. So for all sorts of reasons, it makes no sense. As well, you don't have what you should have, which is somebody actively talking to people in the community all the time about what's going on out on the public land, making sure that the fishing resources we have, the wildlife resources are not being poached, that people are following the rules. So there's no money for that, but there is $236 million to give to religious 2%. It just seems crazy. And that's just one example. When you look at people on disability here in Revelstoke, we have disability rates that haven't gone and really haven't changed significantly in 10, 12 years. And if you look across at Alberta, where somebody with disability will get not quite twice as much, but it's a significant amount. Yeah. So it's a sum of money that makes people's lives unnecessarily difficult. The story that I would use is a gentleman came to the office. He served in the military. He has his military pension. He's also on disability, so he gets most of his disability clawed back because of rules that the Liberals brought in, and so he has very, very little money for him to get through the the year. This tax cut will give a millionaire $17,000. That's more than this gentleman makes in the whole year, and it just seems crazy that you would address some of those issues, which could make a real difference to all sorts of people in this province that need some help, rather than a group that I would say will not significantly notice the tax cut. And it doesn't do anything.
No.
You know, if anybody still argues about trickle down or anything else, this is money that does not come into the system in the same way as it would if it was there with people on disability. They would spend it in the community and generate more economic activity.
I'm sure that you and other members of the opposition point this out to the government and the legislature. I mean, how do they respond, or do they respond? They just
are
they even shamefaced about it?
The legislature is it doesn't work the way really people think it should. The premier is never there. She will show up very rarely. Neither did Gordon Campbell show up a great deal, but he did far more than she does. And the government in MLA seem to stick to the script. And the unfortunate thing about the last election is there's a real sense that they can do anything and still be re-elected, and so there's an indifference to any of the concerns that we raise, which is frustrating. So,
in fact, the legislature doesn't sit nearly as long as it should.
It sits less than pretty well any other jurisdiction. We did sit this fall, but the prediction I would make is that we will not sit next fall or the last fall of this mandate. We simply won't sit. And it's a way of escaping accountability, but there also isn't an agenda. I think everybody knows that the push the Premier made on liquefied natural gas wasn't based on reality. The promise of $1 trillion of economic activity, of getting rid of the debt, getting prosperity fund of $100 billion. I mean, these were outrageous claims that were made leading up to the last election, and it's clear now that what should have always been clear, that this was a fantasy. And
well, it's a bit like buying a lottery ticket. I buy a lottery ticket for every draw because I don't plan my life around it.
And they have done that. Everything up to this year was all LNG. We were going to change the education system, all of it, and yet it wasn't really based on anything real. And it leaves them really without a focus. So we have 3 or 4 pieces of legislation, but they're changes to the Chartered Accountants Act. There's nothing substantive at all. In the fall, we had some of the LNG legislation, which didn't accomplish what they claimed it would. And we know what the numbers are for revenue, and there's nothing there. An LNG plant that does start and operate, at some point you could make $100 million a year, but it's after they've written off their investment, which could take 7 or 8 years. So if an LNG plant ever does get up and going, the benefits will be really into the next decade before you see them. So this session, we have no sense of where they plan to go other than to just sit tight and hope that most people aren't paying attention and focus somewhere else. So that's really where we sit right now.
And are people actually paying attention?
We still get a lot of people phoning into the office, which I very much appreciate. There are issues, of course. One of them, the Trans-Canada Highway, we heard a lot of because of how difficult the winter it was, especially at the beginning. So there are issues. The education system, of course, will be under stress, and then we also have a healthcare budget that, while it sounds substantial, it doesn't meet the known costs for the system. So it's starting to show up in various communities, the weaknesses with the health system, which is still one of the best in the world. You still have to remember that. Nevertheless, there are problems that need to be addressed. We hear a lot about that. But are people paying attention the way they need to? Of course, because I'm in the middle of it, I always wish that people were more attentive. But I have to say, whenever I go into the community and talk to people in Revelstoke or Kimberley or Invermere, people are very knowledgeable and seem to see through the things that aren't true pretty easily, and seem to highlight what the priorities should be pretty clearly too. So if that's an indication of the problems, then people do pay attention, and I guess decide to become active when they feel it's important.
Are they vocal enough?
I think
one thing to read newspapers and watch the news and see what's being said.
Yeah.
It's something else altogether different. My own experience with people is that unless they think that they themselves or their families or their pocketbooks are somehow threatened, they tend not to say much of anything.
Well,
well,
after 10 years, if I was telling people something, I would say that it is time to really watch what is happening at a provincial and I think federal level in terms of democracy. A lot of the checks and balances that people take for granted are being whittled away. Certainly the legislature, I can't speak for the Parliament, but I suspect there's elements of it that are similar. This legislature does not work the way that it should. There's a respect for the institution shown by the government, and they're able to get away with that and avoid accountability. And we see it every day. I don't know if people are aware of that. We're supposed to be able to get information. In fact, even people here in the community use freedom of information to try to get information from government that should be readily available. And the government is in a culture now where we don't keep any records. They use private emails. We had, I think it was just on Wednesday, we were asking for records of 63 meetings that were supposed to have been held by the Ministry of Transportation along the highway of tiers where there's been repeated disappearances. And the issue was whether there should be public transportation to make it so that people didn't have to hitchhike. Well, 63 meetings. The government first said, we can't give it to you because we're busy transcribing the notes that we have. And then finally came back and said, there's no records. There's nothing. And we're getting that again and again where investigations are taking place and nothing's written down. It's purposeful and it's to avoid scrutiny, and of course it's
There's no record at all?
nothing. The Freedom of Information request says they found nothing. And we know from some of the things that went on with the quick win scandal that regularly ministers use private emails, so they'll have a Hotmail account, and any of the discussion they're doing as ministers takes place in those accounts. And therefore, when an FOI request comes in, they say there's no records on their official account, but they've done it on a different account, and that's
no way to compel Hotmail to.
No,
provide
there's
transfers in.
no, you can't. It's not included, but it clearly is not following the law, but to get away with it. So the work that opposition does to try to put checks and balances on government are limited in a way that's detrimental to the broader public. And then huge resources going to the communications work of government. So 200 and 300 people that are.
You mean PR work?
The PR work, right. It's not communications. It's making it difficult for journalists to get at a minister. It's making it so that there's this constant feeding of a particular message box that overwhelms, I think, any other voice that's out there. Certainly the opposition's voice is overwhelmed often, and I think most journalists would say they're hugely outsourced by the government. But while it's just not a good way to spend money, I don't think. And secondly, it might work for government or the premier to make their life more comfortable, but it's covering up mistakes that need to be exposed, and so that's detrimental to our democracy. But there's a huge contempt for the opposition, for any people who want to take it.
There's an instance of that. The Revelstoke City Council, the previous council, wrote to the Minister of the Environment to ask her to reconsider her decision to not fill the vacant conservation officer post here. And a few weeks ago, she wrote back to the new council and said that they have 2 officers in Golden and they have a couple in Vernon. And that is actually an enhancement of conservation officer work for Revelstoke, which just blew my mind.
Yeah.
By not having one here, they're somehow enhancing the service. Who's kidding who? You know, the minister must have just an enormous amount of contempt for anybody who would read that and for her to think that they believe it. Yeah. Nutty.
Yeah, and so the TransCanada is another frustration.
Yeah.
Again, one that Revelstoke has often taken the lead on. Mayor McKee, in his previous role as mayor, Mayor Raven, the councillors, Revelstoke has for a long time been pushing for improvements on the TransCanada, and often the Golden and Revelstoke people within our communities are asked to go and deal with the consequences of having a highway that's simply too often unsafe. I first just to thank people who contact my office and tell me exactly what's going on, raise the issues as they see them, and as I see them too. Traveling, like we were just talking before we got started about the fact that the lines on the road are gone again this year, having just repainted the lines. It seems every year there's places where we've lost them again. Maintenance is an issue, but I think that the part that's frustrating me the most right now is the very clear promise that was made in 2012 by the Premier to divide and 4-lane the highway within a 10-year period is going nowhere. In the budget, they lay out the money that is going to be spent over the next 3 years, and there's a section in the budget, page 17, where it lays out the Kamloops to Alberta border TransCanada 4-laning project. So it lays it out there. This year they spent 27 million. Their intention next year is to spend 40 million, followed by, I think it's 46 million, followed by 16 million. And these are big figures, and I understand that people may think that that is in some way significant. But just to give you an example, the Macdonald Bridge, which is, as people head towards Golden, they'll know that the old bridge over the Columbia just before Golden was replaced recently.
Yeah.
And it was falling apart. There were pieces of cement falling onto the, does it not only cross the river, it also crossed the railway line. Well, we were having pieces of cement fall off the railway line. So this was a bridge that was falling down. And they did a good job on it, but they spent 63 million to do 3 kilometers. So the idea that you're going in a 10-year period to get 280 kilometers that still need to be divided, done, with at the same time as you budget 27 and $40 million, it's just not realistic. The really complicated pieces that we all know about, there's a 4-kilometer section in Kicking Horse Canyon that still needs to be done. That's 800 million. If you look at to the west here, some of these places, like to get past Three Valley Dams, I mean, it's going to be a lot of money. It needs to be done. I was always very careful with any commitment that I made about the funding, but I think when it's life and death, and the Premier has promised it's going to be done in 10 years, for us to be, 4 years into that promise and to see practically nothing put aside to meet that commitment, I find that very frustrating. And I think there's a lot of things that I think have been misrepresented by the Premier in terms of what she intends to do. But when it's life and death, and the need is so great, I think it's particularly wrong to promise something and show no intent to come and do it. And when I see them, they'll tell me, oh, there's no money. And you go, there's no money. You have borrowed more than any other Premier in the history of the province, right? So there's no aversion to debt. And at the same time, that tax cut over 4 years would be $1 billion. You think of what we could do on the Trans-Canada here if over the next 4 years we had $1 billion to put into improvements in the highway. It would be such, I think, an intelligent investment. But still, now we have to go on and on having this continuous fight. And like I say, it's just very frustrating.
I've been here 15 years, and there's been virtually nothing changed. The same things are being said now as were said back in 2000, 2001, 2002.
Well, and we had the signs, right?
That's right.
We had, prior to the 2009 election, we had signs on the highway that said it would be Kamloops to the Alberta border, 4-lane highways. And then just prior to the 2013 election, the same new signs. And the Minister of Transportation coming around doing something that was to make it look like they intended to seriously deal with the project. And I guess the intention is to do it again prior to 2017. It's frustrating and wrong, and people here either will know the victims of that poor highway, or will be asked to go and clean up the very tragic and violent scenes of these accidents. And it galls me, frankly, that they will still say in the House, which they did Wednesday, and I reacted poorly, where the minister asserted that they were putting an additional 591 million in, which is it's not nearly enough, but that's a figure that Premier used 4 years ago. Well, it's not there. It has never been in the budget, and still, somehow by saying it, they think that that's okay to do. So, but on a sunny day like this, we should get too worked up about it. There's much to be thankful for, and maybe what topic do you want to turn to now?
Well, let's go to education.
Sure.
There was something in the budget about education,
yeah.
And I know the BCTF is not at all happy with what's come out of things.
Yeah.
Perhaps you'd like to.
Sure. Well, as people will know, I was a teacher, and I still tell people I'm a teacher and an administrator, and I And the public education system, of course, I think still in BC is fantastic. And I mean, we have here in Revelstoke, like, the two nicest schools built under the BC Rivers that I've seen anywhere. I think these are wonderful schools that have all sorts of things that recommend them as the model for other communities to go forward. And that speaks to, I think, Shirley Bond, who was the minister at the time. I think she made a decision, and I think a big part of it too was the school board at the time, and the administration, and they did a great job. But having said that, in this budget, with this premier, she's following through as she did when she was the Minister of Education, which is really this continuous attack on public education. And here she's not giving the money to meet the known cost increases that the system has. So there's going to be more cuts, as there has been repeatedly over the past decade. And at the same time, they find money 33% more for private schools, which I don't get that, why private schools are so heavily funded publicly, and why there's this intent to push people into private schools, and that's a problem as well. The Premier also found $236 million for the richest 2% at the time when there are so many areas, including education, where this would be better spent. You've got to look after your children first. I mean, that's a community ethic here in Revelstoke. You look after your children, you look after your seniors, you look after those in need, and you look after the environment that we live in. Right? You pretty well have it covered, right?
Pretty much.
And the province should be doing the same. Those should be the factors that are most important to a community. And you know, in Golden, and I'm sure it's the same here in Revelstoke, there are wealthy people in town, but I never get the sense that they're particularly greedy about it. They're also there to help the community that they live in. And I just can't imagine that there was a lineup of millionaires. I just don't think Jimmy Pattison was saying, hey, make sure I get a tax cut here in BC, right? He's got, what does he do with his excess money? He often donates it to, to things, but yeah, so with the education system, I think these are areas that are hugely important to invest in. They give children the opportunity to be the best that they can do. And
makes you wonder what kind of future they have in mind for us if they're not funding the people who are going to create that future.
Well, there's a whole list of things that the government is consciously doing that I think is really destructive if it's carried on. You have, as one would expect in BC, because of how the government collects money, you have a widening gap between the wealthiest and the rest of us. Right? It's predictable. Even with this budget, you're going to pay more on these flat taxes that pretty well everyone pays, right? Like the middle class, you're going to pay more for MSP, you're going to pay more for ICBC, you're going to pay more for BC Hydro, you're going to pay more if you take a ferry on the coast, here thankfully, you're going to pay more if on practically everything if you're going to go to post-secondary training. So inevitably you've got this gap growing, and then you also have most children with still a good education system, but one that is unnecessarily degrading. And we also have to watch our health system to make sure that it's there for those that need it based upon their need, rather than what you may see, which is at some point the privatization, which means that it's there for people based upon their ability to pay, which is I think a real step backwards, and we just have to look across the board to see the problems that creates. So that it does seem like there's an agenda, and I think that tapped into that is the weakening of democracy, because of course if you take away our ability to, as ordinary people, to influence government, then really it's entirely in the hands of the privileged, and I think that's something you have to be wary of. I mean, that is how it works in most of the world. Right?
That's right.
And Canada has always been blessed by an ability to more or less control what government does. And that's something that we have to guard and cherish and really actively participate in.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure, and it's good to see you, especially on a day like this. We're doing this on a Saturday, which people will know is just the most wonderful day you could imagine. It's not a cloud in the sky.
You get to go to the Blood and Gun Club tonight.
Yes, tonight. Which
Eat
is
endangered animals.
yeah. Well, it's the best dinner I think that you go to in a year this way. So I'm not a hunter. I was from Manitoba, so we were raised fishing. We had a lot of ducks, but when I came to Golden, my wife was raised in wild meat, and so we always had lots of dinners, and there's something very special about an opportunity to get deer and elk, and my favorite's moose, so that's what's all
There'll be
tonight.
plenty of that.
There'll be a lot of that. Yeah. So it's a fun evening.
Well, thank you very much again.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. We'll see you again soon.